Hi, comrades. Good afternoon here and wherever else people are listening in. And thank you, Comrade Heather. Believe me, you are not the only young revolutionary whose parents and family predicted that this would just be a phase, you know. I remember my mother and much of my family, you know, and they were wrong, and that was a long, long, long time ago. So welcome to the Revolutionary Club, you know. I want to thank all of the comrades around the country and congratulate them for struggling and working hard to support this strike of immigrant workers and to make May Day all over the country as strong and as militant as possible. And there are many, many good stories. Some of them will be reported in the paper. Some of the information we'll share tonight, and there'll be more information, and we'll be assessing May Day, I think, for a little while, and rightfully so. And I want to thank the comrades here in New York who made it possible this year, on top of everything else, for us to have a serious Workers' World Party contingent with shirts and banners and flags with hammers and sickles and a lot of red, and wow, it was amazing and an honor to walk in our contingent. And you know, we're assessing everything we did, and I think it's mostly good. It's probably a little too early to assess the success of the immigrant strike. Teresa may have some information, others may have some information that they can share. There's been very little in the bourgeois media. I don't think that's a surprise, because I think they were biased against the May Day and the strike specifically. But more will come out, and I have a sense, maybe it's just, you know, a wish, that it was very successful, in spite of the fact that there was tremendous fear amongst immigrant workers that was stoked at every level, that they could be arrested, that they could be fired, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I think when it all comes out, we might be pleasantly surprised, considering what the workers were striking against, just how successful it was, coast to coast, and in the middle of the country, and in the industries that are particularly, you know, immigrant labor intensive. And that's mostly every industry, especially low-wage industry. Again, you know, and this is just my take. I'm interested in what other comrades feel about it. You know, I follow the bourgeois media too much, ad nauseum, you know, and they didn't seem to give this a lot of promotion prior to May Day. You know, there were some other demonstrations, good progressive demonstrations, demonstrate for science, etc. We're all for that. That got a lot of coverage, you know, but pushing a May Day strike, I don't think that was what the bourgeoisie was into. And also, there was a lot of repression. And I suspect, I don't have the information in front of me, correct me if I'm wrong, that there was more repression, not only in New York, but in other places, against May Day marchers and strikers. This may not only be true for this country, but throughout the world, from the reports that I've gotten. And so, you know, clearly our work is cut out for us. We have to continue experimenting with this idea of a general strike, a new kind of mass strike that is not necessarily based on the unions calling it, but is something that comes from the bottom, where people shut shit down. And it seems that You know, we've got to do more shutting shit down. We've got to be more disruptive. Because if the bourgeoisie thinks that they can ignore us, well, we've got to demonstrate to them again and again and again that we will shut shit down so effectively in your face that it will be impossible, no matter what you want to do, it'll be impossible for you to ignore us. Now, moving forward, there's a lot of things to consider. I hope comrades and friends have some thoughts along those lines to share today. Before May Day, in the party, in New York and in other areas, we talked a lot about workers' defense committees. We talked about monitoring, trying to monitor the extent to which employers were punishing or even firing immigrant workers for taking off or striking on May Day. We still intend to do that. It's less than a week away, and more information on the extent to which there have been repercussions, punishments, and firings of immigrant workers is bound to come in. And we have to be prepared to spring into action. I should add that our discussion and our planning for workers' defense committees to expose those bosses that have fired workers, to demonstrate in front of them, to boycott them and do other stuff, you know, to push them back, is more than responding to May Day-related repression. It's a number of things that are involved in this concept of workers' defense. It's defending immigrant workers. It's defending the most marginalized workers who are the primary targets of Trump's racism, white supremacy, and fascism, and the bourgeoisie, which is with him. They're all in his cabinet, you know. And also, there's another possibility that Workers' World Party is very, very committed, interested in exploring. And that's the extent to which workers' defense committees can be broadened out and take up other tasks. Workers need defense committees. We're not trying to replace or rival the organized labor movement. We need the organized labor movement. The problem with the organized labor movement is that the leadership is too moderate. And that's a nice way of saying it in many respects, and too tied to one of the capitalist parties. But that's no reason to throw, what's the expression? You know, the baby out with the bathwater. The organized labor movement, you know, is a movement that the working class in this country and around the world has fought hard for. We must defend them. We stand with them. They're the primary defense organs of the working class. And what we must do is struggle in every way we can think of, mostly from the bottom up. Usually that's more effective than the top down, to make them more revolutionary, to make them more anti-capitalist, to make them more militant, to make them think like, yeah, a general strike, shutting shit down, that's really more effective than all of this money that we give to Democratic Party capitalist politicians. Hello, you know, and this is the future, and it's a future that the working class has to keep taking not only small steps, but big steps in the direction of. And I want to underscore the anti-capitalist, pro-socialist direction that workers' defense committees, or that all of the new, more revolutionary mass organizations and mass movements of struggle around all of the issues that affect our class is taking. It has to be more and more anti-capitalist, comrades, sisters and brothers. It really does, because the political crisis that we're facing, the crisis that ushered Trump into office, is the crisis of capitalism. This sounds, I know, like rhetoric that would be true, and you could say it at a rally anytime 100 years ago, 2 years ago. And that's true. But it's more than rhetoric. It's a precise diagnosis. This reaction, Trumpism, Le Penism, all the other neo-fascist, white supremacist stuff that's happening around the world, it is at its core tied to a crisis of capitalism, a crisis that is irreversible, getting worse. It's what we call capitalism at a dead end. And if we don't understand the need, whatever else our strategy may be, our street tactics, what's next, what are we doing this summer, what are we doing in association with the centennial of the Russian Revolution, or for that matter, the 50-year anniversary of the martyrdom of Che, which I think is this year. And that's just some of the, anniversaries that I can remember. What are we doing to tie the political and the ideological struggle to that? We mustn't forget that. As important as the street tactics are, shutting shit down and massifying them and getting more and more people in them around whatever issues, this political struggle against capitalism and for socialism, we've got to think about that a lot. And we've got to find ways of making it bolder, pushing it in people's face, making it a gravitational force. It will pull people. It will pull people. Some stuff has not been tried, and we've got to try it. If we don't understand the need to do that, I don't think we understand the magnitude of the political crisis that we face. Tomorrow, the bourgeoisie, unless something else happens, will be talking a lot about the elections in France. They are the biggest bourgeois elections since the U.S. elections last year. And the French working class faces a huge crisis. What are they supposed to do? And they know it too, because clearly a section of the French working class and middle class has been drawn into the National Front Le Pen neo-fascist reaction. But on the other hand, for lots of reasons, historic reasons, the French working class, which by the way is more and more African, more and more Arab, more and more Muslim, more and more trans and queer, more and more women, just like the working class here, faces a dead end. Who are they to vote for? The banker who represents high finance, the capitalist establishment in Europe, the European Union, U.S. imperialism, globalization, neoliberalism, austerity, attacks on the working class, or Le Pen, white supremacy, racism, and neo-fascism. If many of them don't go to the polls, it should come as no surprise. And I get the sense that may be what happens. I read in a number of papers that at the biggest May Day march in Paris, there were signs against both, right on. There were signs against both these candidates. Macron, is that his name? No Macron, no Le Pen, And what's the big thing that happened in this country? The big bourgeois political thing that happened. A couple of days ago, Trump got the Republican-controlled House of Congress to take the first step in repealing the Affordable Care Act, what they call, for racist reasons, Obamacare. And this is a huge attack on the working class. I'm sure if we don't have a good article on it, I'm sure we'll have one. It's a brutal attack, on anybody who needs health care. I'm not going to break that down. But we must remember, the Democrats laid the basis for this. Obama laid the basis for this. Why did they not 5, 6, 7 years ago or whenever it was, why didn't they fight for something as simple as single payer? That's not revolutionary. That's not socialism. That's just what a lot of, most industrialized capitalist countries have. All of them. That's what Canada has. Even reaction. I think even Russia has that. To one extent or another. Why didn't they do that? Instead, they have this neoliberal. Let's make a deal with the insurance companies. Healthcare for profit. Make the workers pay for it. And the workers can't afford it. They can't afford the premiums. They can't afford the monthly charges. No wonder it was easy for the reactionaries to agitate against it. The Democrats laid the basis for them. See, it's capitalism. There's no choice. There's always been no choice. But never has that problem been more acute and more dangerous. And this brings it back to our need, whatever else we're doing, to find a way, comrades, find a way to do something big and bold about fighting capitalism and pushing forward socialism. Around this healthcare issue, people should not just be fighting for socialism. They should be in the streets screaming. Those attacks by the police on demonstrators all over the country and all over the world, that should be about health care. And it should be, health care for all equals socialism. Repeal and replace capitalism. That's how you get social health care for all. It's no longer, and I'm saying this to revolutionaries, not to people who just sit around talking about socialism in college, which is okay if it makes you a revolutionary and less than okay if you just move on to the next class. It's not enough. It's not enough to be for socialism, to be interested in it, to even advocate for it. You have to fight for it. And we have got to figure out bigger and better ways to do that. Why isn't there a day? May Day is one of those days. International Women's Day is one of those days, But above and beyond that, why isn't there a day that sort of, capitalism no, socialism yes? Maybe there should be a day like that. Maybe it should be Che's anniversary. I don't know, But we've got to, and this is not a proposal, I'm thinking out loud, pardon me. Comrades may have better ideas, but I'm just saying that we've got to think along these lines. You just can't be a socialist in the closet and have good ideas that could be misinterpreted or interpreted as reforming capitalism, whatever else our program is. Now it's got to be clear that we are for bringing the curtain down on capitalism. And that, what's the slogan that the movement had? A new world is possible. A new world is necessary today, not tomorrow. We've got to do it. We've got to come up with days or even weeks where we have campaigns against capitalism and socialism. If we do this, it will not only attract individuals, maybe in surprising numbers, but other groups who consider themselves socialists. They'll be affected by it. They'll be affected if a party has the nerve, the chutzpah, to say, we're going to start doing this. Not in replace of fighting this or that. We'll do that too, all of the issues that are on the table. But in addition to it, bringing that political and ideological struggle against capitalism and for socialism to the popular struggle in a way bigger than any time in memory and any time in this country for a long, long time. The imperialists are trying to cause a counter-revolution in Venezuela. And they're ratcheting it up. They're pouring money. They're pouring arms. We don't know what else they're pouring in there. But it's beyond crisis time. The government has even said, let's talk, let's negotiate. But they've said, no, We want to burn things down. We want to shoot at people. We want to set fire to things. This is called a counter-revolution. In addition to defending the Venezuelan revolution, one of our slogans, at least one of our slogans, and this is consistent with the point I'm trying to underscore, should be socialism, yes. Counter-revolution, no. Socialism, yes. Our defense of the Venezuelan revolution is consistent with our revolutionary defense of socialism. Thank you. And this was a big march with lots of contingents. We were just one of quite a few contingents with beautiful banners, and so it wasn't, it wasn't like some of the marches that come out of Union Square, and the police seem to have targeted Union Square, although I just don't think it's Union Square where they're trying to shut it down, whatever, But this march was repressed, and it was only after arrests and struggling and going this way and going that way and being stuck and cornered and surrounded that something happened. I don't know exactly what happened. I think it was some, negotiations or whatever, relationship of forces negotiation, that we finally were able to proceed down Broadway. So it's one of the issues that we shouldn't let go. We should continue our analysis of what the hell was all that about, and how do we prepare better? Also, I'm glad that Teresa raised the question of the immigrant participation. It did not seem, there were a lot of people in Union Square. It wasn't like 2006. But it was a lot of people. Finally, by 4:30. But the immigrant community clearly was not a big presence. I don't know what their presence was at Washington Square, and I guess it didn't seem like they. I guess it didn't seem like they had much of a presence at Foley Square, and because so much was at stake for immigrant workers and what they were trying to do, it behooves us to get as much information. Maybe we know it. Maybe it just is what it is. You don't have. You don't have to look any further. They weren't there, But there's so much that's important about this for the entire working class that we should continue to examine and analyze this and come up with the best answers, not just for New York, but nationwide. What happened? We deserve it for the future, and to understand the migrant workers and their relationship to other sectors of the working class. Finally, at least in Union Square, the left, and what some would consider, the ultra left, by comparison to Foley Square, although it wasn't exactly that, they were strong in numbers in Union Square. Youth-wise, and some of the organizations that have been around, and I thought that was a very good thing. It does not account for who was not there, but in and of itself, it was a good thing. And I think it's a sign of the times. Is it a sign of, the Trump era, and groups getting a little stronger or a little bolder and reorganizing? Maybe not. But I think we should give a lot of thought to that. Both veteran comrades and our younger comrades who I suspect may know more about what's going on, that some of us don't see, what's going on in social media and what people are saying, and, who's gaining and who's not. I understand that, some comrades want, even if not all, some of our regular Workers' World Party meetings, not just to be meetings where a couple of us give nice speeches and we have political discussion. That's good. We won't give that up. But at least, some of them should be more different, where we talk strategy and their business meetings, and everybody has something to contribute, however big, however small, and I think we'd all benefit from that. And I hope that they don't give that up, and I hope that they try to have that, and that this hall, smaller than we'd like, but real estate in New York is ridiculous, that it will be a home for the revolutionary left, or the left that's trying to be revolutionary, or those even in between that we can pull, and that they'll be pulled to Workers' World Party meetings, and that they'll see that where we may have very, very strong positions, historic and contemporary, we are not sectarian. And we don't kick you out the door unless you're a bigot, or reactionary, or just doing something so sexist, misogynist, doing something so terribly inappropriate. Come in, come. You're welcome. You're welcome. We'd like to turn. Well, actually, this hall and our hall that we had 5 years ago was always that, but more consciously do that. And I think it's up to the younger comrades to do that. And, don't assume that the veteran comrades have the answer to everything. Unfortunately, when you've been around a few decades, you begin to think that you know everything. But that sometimes is not true. So sometimes you are a victim of some old attitudes, and you need some new energy. You need some new. This is how things grow. This is how things change. Otherwise they become static. Anybody who understands revolution and history knows this. I mean, it's like seasons. Turning from one season into another. Anyway, that's it. Thank you.